Welcome back, Rankers. How are you? I had an awesome time in Sydney last week. In case you missed it, I was at DigiTalks in Sydney talking about how brand is influencing your search rankings. And we're doing it again this Friday in Melbourne, but I'll give you the details on that in a second. I wanted to talk to you today about ranking factors, all right? Because this is what we're talking about in these talks. And the definition of a ranking factor for some people is different to others, all right? And people get hung up on the word. So I actually prefer to think of a ranking path for a business, not ranking factors. And I'll explain why. But by and large, ranking factors, when people refer to them, they're usually referring to these sorts of things, right? So these are things that Google has told us that are ranking factors, like internal links and external links, titles, etc. But I would also add they've talked about things like popularity. Gary Isles has told us about brand mentions and citations. So people get sort of hung up on this usually because they're trying to work out what is the thing that they need to do to trick Google. All right, and that's where we get into problems. So we know that SEMrush last year told us all that they found that in their studies that direct traffic was the major ranking factor, and they use those terms. Now, the problem with a lot of that from a lot of people's perspective is that they got into this, is causation, is it correlation, where you're getting that data from? From my perspective, it was like, that makes sense to me because that would indicate that brand is strong. Because if I'm getting a lot of people coming directly to me, then that would indicate brand is strong. But one of the problems with direct traffic is, which one of these sources is it coming from? So, bookmarks used to be the main source of direct traffic, or people just typing in your web address. People just typing in your web address is kind of, for most people, if they've been to your site already, it's going to get auto-completed. So for a lot of these, a lot of the direct traffic, it's actually returning traffic, even though Google Analytics may not be showing that in the sessions. It might not be reflected in the sessions that it is a lot of returning traffic. In fact, most of the direct traffic we see in Google Analytics is marked as new sessions. That can be for a number of reasons. And, one of them is that direct traffic in Google Analytics is basically a catch-all for any other traffic that doesn't have referral data. So, for instance, if you're coming in from Facebook, when you click, it will send data to the server that says I'm coming to you from this particular link on Facebook. Now, if it doesn't have any of that stuff, or if it doesn't have any sort of campaign coding around it, UTM codes, those sorts of things, Google will drop it into direct traffic. So this includes things that they call dark social, which is things like I share a link via Skype, I share a link via WhatsApp, I share a link via Messenger, SMS, email. All of these sources are not going to get tracked, but by and large, they are indications that the user is coming directly to your site because they want to and they know who you are. Usually, if it's coming in via dark social, it's come with a recommendation, right, from a friend. So it's stronger traffic. But I would say that in all these cases, one way to increase these is by building your business and your brand and focusing on your brand. And that's what we're talking about. So for me, the ranking factors, I don't give a rat's fat clacker because it's not what we're trying to do. We're not trying to trick Google. And, as I said to the crew in Adelaide 2 weeks ago, and Gary Isles was in the audience there. And thank you, Gary, for fixing my rankings. I explained to him that it was ridiculous at the conference that Stuart Media was ranking number 5 for Search Console, and we'd had 10,000 impressions and only 4 clicks, and it was ridiculous that we should be ranking with that. And he's fixed it by the looks of it, because we no longer rank for Search Console. Thanks, Gary. But I encourage people to think about a ranking path. How are you going to get the rankings that you want? And what we know now is that what Google rewards, yes, it does reward all that stuff, but why is it rewarding that stuff? And that's what the question you have to ask. Why does it reward those things? And for me, it's because it's a great user experience. And Google has made, well, no secret of that. they're looking for the most relevant results for the user. And if they can provide that and they can send users to sites that have a great experience for them, people are going to keep using Google. And that's what the game is here. And the same applies for AdWords as it does for organic. So what we encourage people to do as well is to focus on the customer. So that doesn't mean ignoring technical things like this graph here. So we've seen in this, and this is the first, the first 11 days in May versus the first 11 days in March. Reason I've excluded April in this is the client had a massive sale and in April, and the data is skewed, and we're also doing other stuff in April. But this is sort of March is before the fact and May is after the changes. So this is the one that I showed you a few weeks back where the Google bot was not getting into, well, it was only getting into about 10% of the site. And that was because the server, or the CMS I should say more accurately, was having a problem with some of the Google bots. And it was intermittently, temporarily redirecting them. So you would have these situations where the Google bot would be intermittently 302 to another page, and then later on it wouldn't be. And that basically resulted in most of its content not being indexed. It took me a while to find this because we had to go through a lot of tests and a lot of rigmarole, but we eventually found that the problem was that the desktop bot was being redirected because of a plugin or a feature in Magento, which was user agent verification. We switched that off and that fixed everything. The result of that is 32% more traffic. And then over here, you can see that's resulted in 61% more revenue. Or if you can't see that, if that's slightly off screen for you, that's about 60,000 to 95,000. And so that's a significant chunk of change. And that's just organic traffic, right? Because this is based on what's happened with the bot. So if you focus on the customer, and what we can see here is this is what happens in this situation. So you've got to do your good technical SEO. I'm not saying you don't, but that is the same way as you need to tune your car if it's your main vehicle for business. That's your brand, right? So tune your brand. So here we've got 181 clicks, 2,500 impressions, and in the same period that we've just shown in the Google Analytics, we've had 1 click and 162 impressions. And you can see here, average position now for this particular keyword is number 7, and it was 46 or probably 50, maybe even lower. But basically why that has happened is because Google can now crawl the site and it can see the content it needs to see. So what was happening is that this page down here was actually the home page. And during the period, that first period of March, you can see there it's had 1 click, but it's had, in that period, it had 155 impressions. So what that meant was that, this is early March, 155 impressions. So what that meant was it was the home page that was displaying for this particular keyword, even though there was a target page internally. Google didn't know that. Once the crawl went up and the crawl rate went up and it could start seeing things, it's picked up the target page properly. That's the one now getting all the clicks, and that's the one now getting all the impressions. So now in May, it's getting 2,500 impressions, and the other one is only getting 13 impressions. So that one's dropped right off, and that will continue to grow. And that's just one key phrase, right? So that's happened with a bunch of key phrases, which is why we've seen this 61% addition in revenue. So that's why I say focus on the customer, but be of course aware of good SEO or good technical SEO, I should say, because that is how we are going to, you don't want to trick Google, but you just want to get ahead of the curve. And I just want to show you one other thing before we go today. Not that story on Google being sneaky. Here's another. So don't forget, we've got Retail Global at the end of this month. It's the best e-commerce conference in the country. Heaps of speakers, over 1,000 attendees. And I think tickets, there's still some available. But you better be quick, because I think this is probably the biggest year there's been. So end of May, go and look it up. Retail Global, awesome conference, best retailers conference in the country. And then this Friday, if you missed out on the presentation in Sydney for DigiTalks, I'm giving it again this Friday, 18th of May, at the Docklands. Just Google Jim Stewart's DigiTalks Melbourne, and you will find this link here at Eventbrite. Hopefully that's helpful. Hopefully we'll see you on Friday if you're in Melbourne, and we'll see you next week. Thanks very much. Bye.